Hey, everybody. This is the How to Succeed podcast, the show that helps you get to the top and stay there. We're talking about how to succeed at becoming fearless with Stephanie Van Dam. She is a Sandler trainer from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And I'm Mike Montague, Director of Community Engagement at Sandler. We are the world's largest sales training, management training, and customer service training company in the world. The following podcast is copyrighted by Sandler Systems, Inc. and protected by U.S. copyright laws. You can find more information about Sandler if you go to sandler.com. We made it really easy for you. All right, here we go. It's how to succeed at becoming fearless. Stephanie, welcome to the podcast. Tell me a little bit about being fearless. You're talking about this today on the podcast, but also at the Sandler Summit in March 2023. We're going to have over 1,000 salespeople and sales leaders there. And you got on the stage to talk about being fearless. How did you land on this topic?
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike, for having me here. I'm really excited to be part of the podcast for the listeners here talking about becoming fearless. I think a lot of people, what got it for me was, how many times have we been to a conference, read a book, and at the end of that conference or book, we took that one thing that we wanted to implement into our business, into our life, whatever it was, and then 2 months, 1 month later, it's sat on the shelf. It didn't do anything, but we were so convinced at the time that this was going to be the solution to whatever our particular problem was. And it just got me thinking about, why is it that we don't implement those things? Why is it that there are so many opportunities that we know could be available to us, or resources that are available to us, but we don't take that final step? And that got me into thinking about how that is perhaps disguised, that's fear disguised as those things, and how we can break through that to be able to get to the next levels, grow ourselves, grow our business and our teams in terms of getting to the next level.
Yeah, I think fear is an interesting one because it's also one that we can kind of be in denial about, right? We know that our comfort zones are kind of what keeps us where we're at. And we know that there's fear associated with leaving the comfort zone. Mm-hmm. But psychologically, I think sometimes we think we can just flip a switch, or we can just do it, or we really know that we're afraid of something. And those are kind of two different scenarios. When you're thinking about the ideal attitude for stretching your comfort zone, getting to the next level, what are maybe some common misconceptions about fear, and then ideal attitudes we should have?
Yeah, absolutely. I think where I'd like people to start is to maybe ask the question of themselves, like, what would I do immediately if I knew I couldn't fail? It's an interesting question. What would I do immediately? And we're constantly setting goals, I think, for ourselves, whether that's quarterly or annually. Every 6 months we set those goals. So what's holding us back from achieving those? The famous New Year's resolutions that people always set but never do, or they just stop setting them because they don't think they're going to be able to accomplish them. So when we get into the attitude side of things, I think it's to recognize, first of all, that we have perhaps a belief that we can't do something, or that we don't want to do something, even though we know that that will help us to get to that next level. So that awareness, I think, is a pretty big piece. And I think the understanding that becoming fearless is an approach to life, not a quality. And I think that we as a society have this misconception that those who achieve levels of success that we want to get to, that they're fearless people. And that, I think, is inaccurate, if I can say that politely. I think there's that's completely inaccurate, because I think people are still afraid. They become fearless. They move through that fear with different techniques, and they just so that they're able to accomplish those goals.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts there, because I do things sometimes that people say would be fearless. Like, we both do public speaking and getting on the stage here at the summit, and there's 1,200 people, and somebody will always say, "You look so comfortable up there. I can't believe you don't get stage fright or anything." And I always say, well, I still do. I just do it scared that it goes away a little faster. It's not going to stop me from doing what I want to do. And I enjoy that energy rush of those same feelings. And I think that's the key attitude here, is that sometimes fear is what makes life interesting. It makes you pay attention. It makes you wake up. If you're not doing anything that you're afraid of, you're going to be bored. You're going to be in comfort zones. You're going to get burnt out doing monotonous, repetitive work. And so it's not that you're fearless or you don't have fear anymore. It's that you've learned to develop that skill that you mentioned of dealing with the fear and leaning into it and learning how to manage it and how to get over it. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and our egos, I mean, gosh, our egos, right? They're so wonderful or not. But I think fear keeps our ego in check. Like it prevents us as, oh, I might be embarrassed, or I don't want to look silly. I don't want to lose, or like feel like I don't know the information, right? I don't have enough money. I don't have enough knowledge. I don't have enough experience. All of those things. Our ego does a wonderful job of keeping us in check that way. And so if we're aware of that, then how can we use that to our advantage, and maybe even switch it around to making something even a bit humorous, a bit funny. How many times have we all done a thing where, I can't do that, I can't do that. And then afterwards you've done it and you're like, well, that wasn't so bad. Why did I feel that? How many people, you go to an amusement park, maybe some people are afraid of roller coasters. I love roller coasters. So this is not, but you see people get so terrified of going on a roller coaster. They do it. And afterwards they're like, that was the best thing ever. Why was I so afraid? Right. And they get that, like you talked about, they get a bit of a rush from it. But that's what our ego does a wonderful job of keeping us in check.
I think that's an interesting thought, and it might take us right to behavior of what we can do about it, because I think recognizing it, that your body is afraid of something, is helpful. It helps you realize, and that's what's protecting you. So I think you can even kind of have these conversations with yourself where you say, all right, body, thank you for letting me know that this is something stressful. Like, I'm going to pick up the phone and call a stranger. I'm aware that things can happen, but I'm safe in my room. Nothing can hurt me. I'm going to be physically okay. My business is going to be okay, regardless of how this phone call goes. I'm going to do it anyway. And just that check-in with yourself lets you realize, you're like, okay, I'm feeling something that's telling me I should pay attention, but that doesn't mean it should stop me from doing things, I think is where I go. But what are some things we can do to manage our fear, or just encourage ourselves to work through it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great question, because there are several things that we can do about it. One of the behaviors that we could jump into is, are we setting up time to be able to do some activities to actually move through fear? So some of the things that we can do to get into a space of maybe inspiration to move from fear and up the ladder, so to speak, into a place that we can do those activities. I like to say it's LSD. Now, it's not actually LSD. Don't do drugs, kids. But when we're talking about LSD is an acronym for laughing, singing, and dancing. So if you have, so many of us are on social media, so have you built in that time into your day to be able to take 5 minutes, 10 minutes as a break to go get some laughing, singing, dancing? How many of us do, you've seen that carpool karaoke, right? For those of us that are driving and commuting to places, right? We see people singing in the car, and I'm sure most of us are not judging anybody for singing in the car in a negative way. We're all just, oh, they look like they're having a really good time. So are we doing that? Could you in your house do a little, kitchen dance party with just yourself, with your kids, with your pets, and just take a 5-minute break and get that done? Or of course, laughing. And that is maybe jumping into a social media clip of one of your favorite comedians and having a laugh. When those things are done, then we usually forget about that fear or develop a bit of confidence to be able to do the things that we need to do. So what I would say is build that into your calendar on a daily or certainly on a daily basis to be able to move through the tasks you need to do.
There's been a lot of psychological research and brain research done on this, that we can't hold two conflicting emotions at the same time for very long. That you can't be afraid and be curious at the same time. You can't be laughing and stressed at the same time. It doesn't really work. There's, nervous laughter and other things, but you
Right.
can't be in that positive mindset. And I think what's most interesting for salespeople and sales leaders here is we want to be in that curious mindset. To be our best on a sales call and to have the interpersonal conversations that we need to be relaxed. We need to be playful. We want to be in that mindset, not afraid of what's going to happen. And so some of that, I think, is exposure therapy. It's just when you do it enough, you learn that, the worst case scenarios won't kill you, and the best case scenarios come up just as often, and you get past some of that. But other ones are preparing yourself mentally to be in that mindset before you do whatever it takes to get past whatever's causing you stress.
Yeah. And I think there are a couple things that you can do for that when you're making your sort of critical task list, your to-do list for whatever the next day. Have you also added sort of a priority item to that list, saying, well, which is the that famous book about eating frogs first, like do the hard things first thing in the day. Is that one of the behaviors that you're doing? And so when you look at your list the night before or first thing, however you organize your day, are you doing the hard things first thing in the morning? Because that's how, I think it was Vince Lombardi, I think, said that fear makes a coward out of everybody. So, or fatigue, makes a coward out of everybody. So if fatigue makes you a coward, then do the hard things when you're less fatigued, so you can move through that. I also love your idea about being curious at the same time. You can't be curious and fearful at the same time. So are you asking questions, right? How can you make sure that you're building in that, which goes along with what we do as a salesperson? How can you be curious about the people that you're talking to on a daily basis?
I love that. I love the idea of the watching your schedule. Energy management, I think, is huge. And then we talk about block scheduling a lot here at Sandler too. If you're going to make cold calls or do something uncomfortable, do them all at the same time. Don't spread that stress out throughout the rest of your day, especially if that's something you're avoiding, because you'll always come up with an excuse. But the more you delay it, the more you procrastinate, the more that fear builds throughout the day too. So when you do it first, then the rest of your day gets easier. And when you make those calls early in the week, then maybe you can relax and take Friday off because you hit your numbers and you made your sales and you're all good to go. But if you save all those calls for last thing on Friday, it's really easy to go, maybe I start next week. And that's the way you mentioned the diets and New Year's resolutions. That's the way I diet too. My diets are really good until about lunch. And then maybe that starts tomorrow. So doing the hard choices and things early, I think, definitely makes it a lot easier. Now, we've already shared some kind of techniques in there too. I think those fit in the behavior bucket, but are there any techniques that come to mind? For me, a couple of things that I always think about are questioning strategies. We've already given that a shout out. And like the start stop reverse or the dummy up. I think sometimes people are afraid in a sales call because they don't know what they're supposed to say next, or they're afraid they won't have a good answer. And the little hack for me is always, well, maybe I don't have an answer. Maybe I just have another question. Or if I start to answer when I shouldn't, the start stop reverse is really good because I can stop myself and go, you know what? I might be guessing here. Let me get some more information before I give you that answer. Is it okay if I talk to somebody else and up or down, talk to my manager or talk to the research department and come back with an answer for you? And I think when you have those kind of tools in your toolkit, you realize that you can get out of any situation. And that helps me relax a little bit in sales. But in leadership and life, there are other situations that you might want to prepare for. What comes to mind for you?
For sure. So from any kind of perspective, sales leadership, whether you're going to have a meeting that you're not sure of, gosh, there's nothing sexy about this. Do the pre-call plan, right? Like we keep, how many times you've heard people on this podcast talk about planning, anticipating, and being able to say, I don't know, right? If I don't have the answer to that, that's a perfectly acceptable answer as long as it's followed up with Let me find out for you. So if you've anticipated the different options, this idea that when you anticipate those responses, then those become habit for you. And this gets back to that fatigue piece. When you can automate some of these decisions in your mind, they become habits, then it's less energy sucking for you. And then when you have a new situation come up, then you've got the energy to be able to produce an answer and to respond to it well in those situations. So whether that you're a new manager, a salesperson, certainly an established leader, if you don't know the answer, then that's okay. But have we planned? Right? Have we done the pre-call plan? Like I said, it's not, we harp on this, but there's a reason why we do that because we know it works. So
Yeah.
that would be part of it. The other thing I would talk about from a technique perspective, and this might be more as it relates to the kinds of questions that you might want to ask when it becomes to a specific task or an effort. If you're wanting to develop a specific part of you, whether that's public speaking, I want to get into a mentorship, different part of the business. So when you're saying, well, I can't do that, or I don't think I should, I don't know enough, I don't have enough money, whatever, I don't have enough resources, I don't have enough time. We've heard that one a lot. Then the question I would invite you to ask 4 questions. And the first question would be, what is it that I think that I need to have to be able to get to that next level? So what is it that I think I need to have? And then the next question to that is that really true? And if we sit with it, you know, in your gut, whether you think that that's really true. And so if you thought with that thought that you need that time, money, resources, what kind of person are you showing up as? Is it that best version of you? Or is it sort of the other version that doesn't get you to where you want to be? And again, that's a question you sit with. And I think we all know the answer to that. And then if the question 4 would be, who would I show up as if I didn't have that thought? Who do I want? What's that best version that we keep talking about? That person who's determined, who's curious, who's driven, who's aware, who is acting in alignment with that best version of me. Who do I show up as when I don't think I need those things? And that's question, just that awareness, that brings about the awareness piece. So those 4 questions are really key to be able to break through. That's what I would say.
I love those. And you reminded me just of the technique of journaling here, that writing some of this stuff down, and whether it's daily or even just when you need it. I found that when you write stuff out and you talk to yourself in a journal, it again gives you that separation where you can talk yourself off the ledge or talk yourself into that better version of yourself by just looking at it and write down some of your past failures. You've survived 100% of your bad days up to this point. What makes you think, you're not going to survive another worst case scenario? The other thing is the good days, days where you've been gutsy and write down a whole bunch of things that you're proud of that you took action on and you tried and had success with. And I think once you start looking at those objectively, when we get out of our head and we're all twisted up about the fears in the present moment, when we look at our body of work, we've survived. We've been successful up to this point. We've done this before. Chances are we're going to do that again as we go forward. And I love that much better than the evidence, than possibilities. Sometimes negative people will say, well, what if, the house catches on fire? Well, what if we win the lottery? The chances of those are probably about the same. So why don't we look at the evidence here of most likely it's going to continue going the way it's been going up to this point, unless we do something, positive to dramatically change our results. So I think especially if you want to grow, you got to think about getting outside those comfort zones. But if you're just worried about it falling apart, I think you need to look back and say, hey, we've done this. We've got this. We're going to keep going, especially in uncertain times that we're in right now. I know the economy's squirrely. None of us have ever dealt with this. We're still dealing with the aftermath of the pandemic, but we've survived. Things will survive. There have been recessions and things in the past. It'll come through. Once we realize that that's true, then we can make those great choices you were talking about. Any other final thoughts or tips you'd add here about becoming fearless?
Well, I think the awareness part, what has the tactics and techniques and strategies that you've used up to this particular point, if you are seeking another level of success in whatever that is, better parent, better business owner, better salesperson, what has got you here? Like there's a cliche for a reason. What's got you here won't get you there. So what kind of things can you do? And it could be just one thing, that you could implement into your life, into whatever daily practice, into your schedule to be able to get you to that next level. The last few years and perhaps the next 1 to 2 are going to be able to demonstrate to us that, of course, the people that adjusted, remember that word pivot that we all use that we hated so much now, but those people who were able to identify a new way of operating often were successful. And so what's that one thing that you could implement to be able to get you to the next level?
I love it. Once again, we're talking with Stephanie Van Dam, Sandler trainer from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and she is going to be one of the keynote speakers at the 2023 Sandler Summit. It's March 16th and 17th. The tickets are available now. You go to sandler.com/summit. Make sure you get in there. And I wanted to get to know you a little bit better, Stephanie. So at this point in your career, how do you define success?
That wonderful question. And I think for me, success is being able to consistently show up for me, my team, my family, my community in a way that is aligned with my values. So
I love that.
Yeah, thank you. Me too.
That's a great answer. And I love asking that question because I think it's been different every time I ask somebody. Also, this one on the flip side, what is a failure or maybe a place where you were scared that you got over, a hurdle you got over in order to be successful?
Yep. Equally great question, which is how we assign, sometimes we're in the path of other people and we think that there are mentors or people who've come before us that we need to operate in our lives and business in that same way. So we sort of operate in their shadow. And when I realized that I needed to, kind of carve my own path, step out of that shadow and create my own shadow, then that was, there were a lot of failures on that way, too many that we have time for, but there were a lot of failures on that way that when I realized I didn't have to operate that way, I could cut my own path. That was a really big moment for me.
That's a great lesson. I love the quote, Steve Jobs quote. I hope I'm not stealing yours. This whole world was made up of people essentially no smarter than you. And I think, especially for young people, I love to mention that quote because you think like, oh, people in their 40s have it together. Like they're the boss, they're the manager, they're the owner. And now that I'm in my 40s, you're like, oh, they're just making it up as they go along, just like everybody else is.
Right.
You start to realize, okay, I can step out. I can be myself. I have this confidence. It's not something that I'm waiting for. I don't need permission for somebody to make me in charge, or I don't need to wait until I'm older to have credibility. I can have that now if I bring that. And the one I also just like to highlight, I won't say names or not to be political, but I think in the pandemic, that was one of my biggest lessons learned. Is that nobody, the smartest scientists in the world, had no idea what to recommend or what we should do. And it was all based on changing constraints and reports and testing. And it was like, okay, well, if they don't know, then really nobody knows. We're all making this up as we go along with our best guesses and the information we have today. So keep doing that. Last question for you, though, is do you have a favorite quote, motto, or mantra?
Absolutely, which is in line with what we're talking about today, is that the magic, all the things that you want are just outside your comfort zone.
I love it. Stephanie, thanks for joining us today. For more information on Sandler, you can go to sandler.com. You can reach out to Stephanie or myself on LinkedIn, and you can get those tickets to the 2023 Sandler Summit at sandler.com/summit. Send this podcast to somebody that you think needs to hear it. Give us a review or a thumbs up. And thank you for listening. Remember, whatever you are, be a good one. The How to Succeed podcast is brought to you by Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales management and customer service training with over 200 locations. For more information, visit sandler.com. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to click subscribe to get notified about future sales and leadership videos from Sandler.
The Sandler Summit returns in 2023. Each new event builds exponentially upon the energy and success of the prior year. The 2022 Sandler Summit event was a huge success for everyone who attended, so don't miss the next one. Buy your tickets to the Sandler Summit at sandler.com/summit.